Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of the Galactic Defense Force flagship Eternal Vigilance, his forearms crossed as he studied the tactical display. The Voidborn had broken through 3 defensive lines in the past solar cycle, and their relentless advance threatened to reach the core worlds of the Galactic Union. The alien parasites consumed everything in their path, turning entire star systems into twisted hives of corruption. "Status report," Zethkar commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had fought in 12 different wars across the galaxy. Captain Velanara, a crystalline being from the prison worlds, turned her faceted head toward him. Light refracted through her transparent body as she spoke. "Sir, we've lost contact with the 7th Fleet. Long-range sensors show Voidborn bioships moving toward the Kepler sector." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Every species represented on the bridge, the insectoid Kithera, the plant-like Verdani, the energy beings called the Nexus, all understood what this meant. The Kepler sector was home to over 2 billion civilians across 14 worlds. "What about reinforcements?" asked Lieutenant Commander Thorax, his rocky mineral folk features showing deep concern through the shifting patterns of his stone-like skin. "The 4th and 9th fleets are still 3 cycles out," Velanara replied. "Even if we push our engines beyond safety limits, we can't reach Kepler before the Voidborn establish their breeding grounds." Zethkar's primary hands clenched into fists. In his 200 years of service, he had never felt so helpless. The Voidborn were unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They didn't negotiate, didn't retreat, didn't even seem to understand the concept of mercy. They simply consumed, reproduced, and spread like a disease across space. "Sir," called out Communications Officer Exi from her station, her tentacles dancing over the control surfaces. "We're receiving a transmission on an ancient frequency. It's encoded in the old pre-Union languages." "Which species?" Zethkar asked, though he had a strange feeling he already knew the answer. X's bioluminescent patches flickered in confusion. "That's the strange part, sir. It's not from any known species. The linguistic patterns match theoretical models we have for humans." A collective intake of breath echoed across the bridge. Humans were legend, myth, stories told to young ones across 1,000 worlds. Every civilized species had some version of the human tale, mysterious beings who had vanished from known space long before the Galactic Union formed. Some said they had transcended physical existence. Others believed they had discovered faster-than-light travel and disappeared into distant galaxies. Most scholars agreed they had probably gone extinct eons ago. "That's impossible," Thorax rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "Humans are mythology. Ancient star maps show empty space where their supposed homeworld once was." "Play the transmission," Zethkar ordered. The speakers crackled with static before a voice came through, organic, warm, unlike the mechanical translations they were used to hearing from other species. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Fleet vessel Defiant. We've been monitoring your communications and are aware of your situation with the entities you call Voidborn. We are prepared to offer assistance." The bridge erupted in shocked murmurs and clicking sounds from various species. Zethkar raised 2 of his hands for silence. "How do we know this isn't some kind of Voidborn trick?" Velanara asked. "They've shown the ability to mimic other species' communications before." "Because," came the human voice again, apparently having overheard, "the Voidborn don't ask permission before they help. Stand by for visual contact." The main screen flickered and then displayed an image that made everyone on the bridge freeze. The creature looking back at them was bipedal, like many species, but there was something different about its eyes. They held an intensity, a fire that seemed almost familiar yet completely alien. The human had light brown skin and dark hair tied back in what appeared to be a practical style. Behind her, Zethkar could see other humans moving around what was clearly a ship's bridge. "I am Captain Sarah Chun," the human said. "We've been watching this conflict from the outer systems." "The creatures you're fighting?" "We've encountered their kind before." "That's impossible," Zethkar found himself saying. "Our records show no previous contact with the Voidborn before they appeared in our galaxy 3 years ago." Captain Chin's expression grew serious. Not in your galaxy. In others. Commander, what I'm about to tell you might be hard to believe, but humanity has been fighting entities like these for longer than your species have had space travel. We call them different names, the Devourers, the Endless Hunger, the Black Tide, but they're all variations of the same cosmic plague. You're saying you fought them before? And won? Velanora's voice carried desperate hope. Won, lost, survived, evolved. Chun's image leaned forward. Commander, may I suggest a meeting? Face to face? I think there are things about this war that you need to understand. Zethkar looked around his bridge. His crew represented the finest military minds of 17 different species, and every one of them looked as confused and amazed as he felt. Humans weren't supposed to exist. Yet here one was, claiming to have experience fighting their greatest enemy. What do you propose? He asked. We'll transmit coordinates for a neutral meeting point. One ship from each side. No weapons charged, purely diplomatic. What you learn there will determine whether we can work together to save your core worlds. After the transmission ended, the bridge remained silent for long moments. Finally, Thorax spoke up. Sir, even if they are real humans, how do we know we can trust them? They've been hiding from galactic civilization for generations. Because, Zethkar said slowly, if they wanted to harm us, they could have done it already. If they've really been fighting the Voidborn for as long as they claim, they clearly possess military technology we can't imagine. 2 cycles later, Zethkar found himself aboard a shuttle approaching the coordinates the humans had provided. He had chosen a small diplomatic crew, Velanara for her analytical mind, Thorax for his tactical expertise, and Dr. Fine, a nexus entity whose energy-based physiology might give them insights into human biology. The human ship was unlike anything in their databases. Where Galactic Union vessels were built for efficiency and standardization, this craft seemed almost organic in its flowing lines. It was smaller than their flagship, but radiated a sense of power that made Zethkar's combat instincts prickle. Defiant. This is Commander Zethkar requesting permission to dock. Permission granted, Commander. Bay 2 is open and pressurized for your atmospheric needs. The docking bay was surprisingly familiar, clearly designed to accommodate various alien physiologies. But what struck Zethkar most was the humans waiting to greet them. Captain Chain stood with 4 other humans, and despite their obvious physical similarities to each other, each one carried themselves differently. One wore what appeared to be armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Another had cybernetic implants that glowed with soft blue light. A third appeared completely baseline human, but something in their stance suggested coiled violence. Commander Zethkar, Captain Chun stepped forward. Welcome aboard the Defiant. I know this must be overwhelming. Captain Chun, Zethkar replied, noting that the humans had somehow arranged for perfect translation without any visible technology. I admit, our xenobiologists are going to have numerous questions. Chun smiled, a human expression that somehow conveyed both warmth and sadness. I'm sure they will. But first, let me introduce you to someone who can explain our situation better than I can. She led them through corridors that seemed to adapt their lighting and atmosphere as they passed. The ship was clearly far more advanced than anything the Galactic Union possessed. They entered a large chamber filled with holographic displays showing star maps, battle formations, and what appeared to be biological schematics of various voidborn creatures. At the center stood an elderly human with silver hair and scars across his face that spoke of countless battles. This is Admiral Marcus Reeves, Chun said. He's been coordinating humanity's response to the Devourer threat for the past 40 years. The Admiral turned to face them, and Zethkar was struck by the man's eyes. They held depths of experience that reminded him of the oldest generals he had known, but with something else, a weight of knowledge that seemed almost crushing. Gentlemen, lady, Reeves nodded to each of them. Welcome to the war you didn't know you were fighting. He gestured to the displays around them. What you call Voidborn are just one strain of an entity we've been tracking across multiple galaxies. They're not just invaders, they're scouts, preparing the way for something much larger. Dr. Fine's energy form flickered with interest. Scouts for what? That, said Admiral Reeves, is what we've been trying to figure out for 3 centuries. What we do know is that they follow patterns. They probe, they test defenses, they consume just enough to establish footholds. Then they wait. Wait for what? Velanara asked. The Admiral's expression grew grim. For their masters to arrive? And based on our calculations, that's going to happen very soon. Thorax's rocky features shifted into what his species considered a frown. You're saying the Voidborn we're fighting aren't even the real threat? The joint fleet moved through hyperspace like a perfectly coordinated predator. 60 Galactic Union ships flew in formations that would have confused any military academy instructor, their positions seeming random until viewed from the perspective the humans had taught them. Each cluster of vessels moved according to patterns, inspired by pack-hunting behaviors that humanity had studied and refined over millennia of warfare. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, watching his tactical displays with growing amazement. 3 days of intensive training with human instructors had transformed his crews from traditional military formations into something entirely new. The humans called it swarm intelligence, individual units acting according to simple rules that created complex, adaptive behavior across the entire fleet. Sir, Captain Velanara called from her station. We're receiving the final briefing transmission from Captain Chun. The main screen activated, showing the human captain standing in what appeared to be the Defiance war room. Behind her, Zethkar could see displays showing real-time intelligence about the Voidborn forces in the Kepler sector. What the humans had learned about their enemy in just 3 days was more than the Galactic Union had discovered in 3 years of fighting. All ships, this is Captain Chun. Final briefing begins now. Our intelligence drones have confirmed that the Voidborn have established 3 primary hive clusters in the Kepler sector. They're following their standard Pattern 1 cluster for resource processing, 1 for breeding new warriors, and 1 for long-range communication with their masters. Admiral Reeves appeared beside her on the screen. What makes this situation unique is that they've made a critical error. They've positioned their communication cluster on the 4th planet of the Kepler system, thinking it's safely behind their defensive perimeter. They don't know that humans learned long ago how to strike at the heart of their network. Dr. Sarah Kim, the human xenobiologist who had been working with the Union science teams, stepped into view. We've discovered something about Voidborn biology that your scientists missed. They're not just individual organisms, they're connected by quantum entanglement to a central controlling intelligence. Disrupt that connection and they become much less coordinated. Zethkar had met Dr. Kim during the preparation phase, and her knowledge of Voidborn anatomy was disturbing in its depth. When he had asked how humanity had learned so much about their enemy's internal structure, her answer had been simple and chilling. We've had to cut open a lot of them over the years. The assault will happen in 3 phases, Captain Chun continued. Phase 1. Union forces engage the outer defense clusters using hit-and-run tactics to draw their attention. Phase 2. Human stealth units infiltrate the communication hub and plant quantum disruptors. Phase 3. Combined assault on all remaining positions while the Voidborn are cut off from central coordination. Lieutenant Commander Thorax, who had spent the past 3 days learning human tactical philosophy, looked up from his station. Sir, the humans are requesting that we trust them with the most dangerous part of the mission. That was putting it mildly. The human plan required their ships to penetrate deep into Voidborn-controlled space, land strike teams on a heavily defended planet, and somehow disable alien technology that the Union's best scientists barely understood. It was the kind of mission that military doctrine would classify as suicide. Captain Chun, Zethkar said, are you certain your people can accomplish the infiltration? Our intelligence suggests the communication hub is guarded by at least 300 bio-warriors. Chun's expression grew serious. Commander, there's something about humanity that we haven't fully explained yet. We didn't just develop new technologies to fight the Devourers, we developed new ways of being human. The team going after that communication hub isn't just trained differently than your soldiers. They're different on a fundamental level. Before Zethkar could ask what that meant, the transmission switched to a different view showing 4 humans in what appeared to be an equipment bay. These weren't the same humans he had met during the diplomatic conference. These individuals moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost inhuman, and their equipment was unlike anything in the Union's arsenals. "This is Lieutenant Marcus Webb," came a voice that sounded calm to the point of being eerie. "Call sign, Ghost. My team will be handling the infiltration." Webb appeared to be a baseline human male, but something about the way he held himself suggested coiled violence. The other 3 members of his team were even more unsettling. One seemed to flicker in and out of visual focus as if the cameras couldn't quite lock onto her. Another appeared to be wearing armor that shifted color and texture as Zethkar watched. The third looked normal until he turned, revealing cybernetic implants that covered half his skull. "With respect, Lieutenant," Dr. Fine interjected, his energy form pulsing with concern. 300 bio-warriors have proven capable of overwhelming entire Union battalions. How do 4 individuals expect to succeed where armies have failed? Webb's smile was predatory. "Doctor, has anyone ever explained to you what humans were like before we left known space? Before we encountered the Devourers? Our historical records suggest humanity was technologically advanced but relatively peaceful," Velinara answered. "That's partially correct. We were peaceful because we had learned to control something about ourselves that most species never had to face. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Doctor. We're one of the few intelligent species that developed from predators, who specialized in running their prey to exhaustion over impossible distances. We're pack hunters who learned to use tools, and we spent 200,000 years perfecting the art of killing things that were bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than we were." The flickering woman stepped forward. "The Devourers taught us to remember what we really are underneath all that civilization. My name is Lieutenant Sarah Voss, call sign, Shade. I haven't been completely solid matter for 6 years." Zethkar felt his exoskeleton prickle. "What do you mean?" "I mean that fighting entities who exist partially outside normal spacetime required us to learn how to do the same thing. The bio-warriors you're worried about can't kill what they can't touch." The cybernetic human spoke next, his voice carrying electronic harmonics. "Sergeant Jackson Pierce, call sign, interface. I can communicate directly with most forms of technology, including void-born biotech. Their communication systems weren't designed to account for someone who can speak their language natively." The 4th team member, whose armor continued to shift and change, simply nodded. "Corporal Elena Rodriguez, call sign, Mimic, I adapt." Admiral Reeves appeared on screen again. "Gentlemen, what you're seeing is what 3 centuries of warfare against cosmic horrors does to a species. We've had to become something that can fight the impossible and win. Are they still human?" Dr. Fine asked quietly. "That," said Captain Chun, "is a question we've been debating among ourselves for decades. What we know for certain is that they're effective." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, and immediately the scope of the void-born infestation became clear. What had once been a thriving system of 14 inhabited worlds was now a twisted nightmare of organic structures and pulsing bioships. The void-born had been busy. "All Union ships begin Phase 1, Chun commanded. "Remember your training? Hit fast, move constantly, never let them pin you down." Zethkar watched his tactical display as the Union fleet split into hunting groups and began harassing the void-born outer defenses. The aliens responded exactly as the humans had predicted, with overwhelming force directed at whatever target seemed most threatening. The key was to never be where they expected you to be when that force arrived. "Sir," Velinara reported, "Union forces are successfully drawing void-born attention. Their response patterns match human predictions exactly." On the secondary screen, Zethkar could see the human infiltration teams ship a sleek vessel that seemed to absorb sensor readings rather than reflect them, approaching the 4th planet undetected. The fact that a human ship could remain invisible while flying through the middle of a void-born swarm suggested technological capabilities that dwarfed anything the Union possessed. "Phase 2 commencing," came Lieutenant Webb's calm voice. Approaching insertion point. What followed was 20 minutes of the most tense silence Zethkar had ever experienced. The infiltration team's ship disappeared from all sensors as it entered the planet's atmosphere. The Union fleet continued their harassment attacks, drawing more and more void-born forces away from the central positions. But without knowing whether the human strike team was alive or dead, the entire plan hung in balance. Then suddenly something changed. "Sir!" Thorax called out excitedly. "Void-born coordination patterns are breaking down. Their formations are becoming erratic." On the tactical display, Zethkar could see it happening in real time. The bioships that had been moving with perfect coordination began operating independently, often working at cross purposes or repeating the same maneuvers unnecessarily. It was as if someone had severed the strings controlling a vast puppet army. "Phase 2 successful," came Webb's voice, now with an edge of satisfaction. "Quantum disruptors are active. Enemy hive-mind connection is severe." The emergency session of the Galactic Union Council convened in record time, with representatives from all 47 member species. Gathering in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime, Commander Zethkar stood before the assembled delegates. Still bearing the marks of battle from the Kepler sector engagement? Behind him, holographic displays showed the tactical recordings of humanity's impossible victory against the void-born forces. High Counselor, the eyes of the Etherian collective rose from her floating dais, her translucent form shimmering with anxiety. "Commander, you ask us to believe that mythical beings not only exist, but possess military capabilities that surpass our understanding. This strains credibility." "With respect, High Counselor," Zethkar replied, 3 days ago I would have agreed with you. But I've seen their ships phase through normal space, watched their soldiers accomplish missions that should have been impossible, and witnessed tactical coordination that suggests capabilities we can barely comprehend. Delegate Korn of the Hive Minds buzzed his mandibles irritably. "Even accepting that these humans exist, you're asking us to undergo biological and technological modification by an unknown species. The risks are nothing compared to what's coming," interrupted Dr. Fine, who had been granted special permission to address the council. His energy form pulsed with urgency. "Counselors, I've analyzed the data from our engagement with the Voidborn. Without human intervention, we would have lost not just the Kepler sector, but likely the entire outer rim within months." Representative Vex Thala of the Mineral Folk shifted his rocky frame. "Dr. Fine, surely our combined fleets could mount an adequate defense if properly coordinated." "No, sir, they cannot." The voice belonged to Captain Sarah Chun, who materialized on the chamber's central hologram projector. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs as they found themselves face to face with a living legend. "Council members," Chun continued, "I apologize for the intrusion, but time is running out faster than we anticipated. Our long-range sensors have detected course corrections in the approaching Devourer fleet. They're accelerating. We now estimate 18 days until they reach Union space." Admiral Reeves appeared beside her in the hologram. "Counselors, in 18 days, this chamber will either be the command center for the greatest military alliance in galactic history, or it will be a breeding ground for entities that will use your bodies to spawn horrors beyond your imagination." High Counselor Tice's form flickered with indignation. "Admiral, your tone is hardly diplomatic." "Diplomacy," said a new voice, "is a luxury for species that have time to negotiate." Every being in the chamber turned toward the source of the voice. Standing at the chamber's entrance was a human unlike any they had seen before. Admiral Elena Vasquez moved with predatory grace, her form enhanced with modifications that made her seem both more and less than human. Her left arm was clearly cybernetic. Her eyes held flecks of light that suggested technological integration, and when she smiled, her teeth reflected light in ways that suggested they weren't entirely organic. "I am Admiral Vasquez, Supreme Commander of Human Space Forces," she said, walking toward the center of the chamber. "I've come to address the Council directly because there are things about our offer that require clarification. How did you get past our security?" demanded General Thrak of the warrior caste. The same way my people have been moving undetected through your galaxy for 3 years, Vasquez replied casually. We've been studying your defenses, learning your capabilities, and preparing for this moment since we first detected Devour Scouts in your space. The chamber fell silent. Representative Kalos of the Trade Federation found his voice first. You've been spying on us? We've been protecting you, Vasquez corrected. Do you think the Voidborn you encountered were the only Devour Scouts in your galaxy? We've eliminated 17 separate incursions over the past 3 years. Incursions you never knew existed because we stopped them before they could establish themselves. Dr. Fine's energy form brightened with realization. The unexplained disappearances in the outer systems. The ships that vanished without trace. That was you? Some of it. The rest were Devourer Scouts that we couldn't stop in time. Vasquez activated a holographic display that filled the chamber's central space. This is what we've learned about their strategy. The display showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with red markers spreading like an infection across multiple sectors. The Devourers don't simply invade. They prepare. They study. They adapt their approach based on the specific characteristics of each civilization they encounter. By the time you knew about the Voidborn, they had already been transmitting data about your military capabilities, your species' psychology, and your technological weaknesses for over a year. High Counselor Tice's translucent form paled further. They've been studying all of us. Every species, every ship class, every tactical doctrine in your databases. When their main fleet arrives, they'll be prepared for everything you can possibly throw at them. Vasquez paused, letting the implications sink in. Everything except us? Because you're not in our databases. Counselor Vexthela realized. Because we've learned to be unpredictable on a fundamental level. Admiral Reeves corrected from the hologram. Counselors, what Admiral Vasquez isn't telling you is that this alliance we're proposing isn't just about sharing technology. It's about teaching your people to think in ways the Devourers can't catalog or counter. Captain Chun stepped forward in the hologram. The modifications we're offering aren't just enhancements. They're evolutionary adaptations that change how individuals process information, react to threats, and coordinate with others. The humans who will be training your people have undergone modifications that make them functionally different from baseline humanity. Different how? Asked Delegate Corin. Admiral Vasquez extended her cybernetic arm, and the limb began to shift and change, revealing weapons, scanning devices, and interfaces that defied easy categorization. I can interface directly with technology that has never existed before. I can process combat information faster than most ship computers, and I can coordinate with other modified humans in ways that approach a form of group consciousness. You're talking about creating an entirely new form of sapient life. Dr. Fine said quietly. We're talking about survival, Vasquez replied. And victory. But yes, the beings who emerge from this process will be something unprecedented in galactic history. Representative Kilos leaned forward. What guarantees do we have that modified beings will retain loyalty to their original species? The same guarantee we have that unmodified beings will survive the next 80 days, said a new voice from the chamber entrance. Every head turned to see Lieutenant Marcus Webb entering with his strike team. These were the humans who had infiltrated the Voidborn communication hub, and seeing them in person made their inhuman capabilities even more apparent. Lieutenant Shade flickered in and out of visible existence as she walked. Sergeant Pierce's cybernetic implants pulsed with data flows that could be seen through his skull. Corporal Rodriguez's adaptive armor continued its constant shifts, apparently sampling and mimicking materials from the chamber walls. Counselors, Webb said. I volunteered for my modifications 6 years ago. Before that, I was what you would call a baseline human. I had friends, family, personal attachments to my homeworld and culture. The modifications didn't erase those connections, they enhanced them. When I fight not just as an individual, but as someone carrying the hopes and memories of everyone I've ever cared about. Lieutenant Shade's form solidified enough for her to speak clearly. The fear that modification will rob you of your essential nature is understandable but misguided. We're still who we were, we're just more capable of protecting what matters to us. And if we refuse your offer? High Counselor Theises asked. Admiral Vasquez deactivated her arm's transformations and returned it to its standard configuration. Then humanity will continue our long war against the Devourers, carrying the memory of another civilization that couldn't adapt quickly enough to survive. We've seen this pattern across multiple galaxies, Counselor. We've learned to grieve for entire species. But you'll fight for us regardless, Counselor Vexthella said. It wasn't quite a question. We'll fight alongside you for as long as possible, Captain Chun replied. But without integration, without the full alliance we're proposing, the outcome is predetermined. You'll lose. Billions will die. And humanity will be forced to evacuate whatever survivors we can manage to save. The chamber fell into contemplative silence. Finally, General Thrax spoke. If we agree to this alliance, how quickly can the modifications be implemented? That depends on how many of your people volunteer, Admiral Vasquez answered. Basic cybernetic interfaces can be installed in hours and provide immediate tactical advantages. Biological enhancements take 2 to 3 days but offer more profound improvements. Full integration, she paused. Full integration takes a week and results in capabilities that are difficult to describe to those who haven't experienced them. What about ships? Asked Fleet Admiral Zen of the Deep Space Command. Can our vessels be similarly enhanced? Sergeant Pierce stepped forward, his cybernetic implants glowing brighter.